Good evening. Probably one of the most challenging aspects of loving people and being genuinely compassionate and caring is the fact that often we see a lot of the negativity, we see a lot of the qualities that may be disappointing to us, that may be irritating, annoying. And the idea of having an ayin tov, having a good eye, and finding the good, seeing the good within each other, within ourselves, is something that it needs development. We have to cultivate it. It does not come naturally, but it can be literally the difference between living a life of love and joy and connection in contrast to a life of constant bitterness, having tainas and complaints. Whenever we see the Ra, too often, we're not happy people. When the majority of our conversations with each other is about all of the problems and the issues with the people I work with siblings, parents, obviously those conversations need to happen within the confines of Lashon Hara, obviously being very sensitive. But when we find that the majority of our energy is spent on the Ra, the negative, we're not happy people, we're not living with that sense of love and simchas achayim. When Avram Avinu was told by his wife that he needs to send away Hagar and Yishmael, he was very distressed. V'teira Sarah es ben Hagar ha-Mitzris asher yolda l'Avram mitzachek. Sarah saw that Yishmael was mitzachek. And Rashi, quoting from the Medrash, explains mitzachek means he was involved with pretty bad stuff. According to one opinion, it was murder, perhaps it was idolatry, immoral relationships. He was very, very off the derech in a severe way. He was poisonous to Yitzchak. And therefore, v'tomer la'Avram, Goresh ha'ama hazos ve'es bena, send away Hagar and her son. Vayera hadover ma'od be'enei Avram al odos beno. Literally, Vayera means that it was Ra. It was evil in the eyes of Avraham regarding his son. Nonetheless, Vayomer Elokim el Avraham, al yera beinecha al anar v'al masecha. Hashem communicates with Avram and he says, don't view this in a negative way regarding sending away Hagar and your son, Yishmael. Rather, listen to Sarah. Ki b'Yitzchak yikari lecha zara. Through Yitzchak you will have descendants, but not through Yishmael. Shama b'kola, listen to her voice, Rashi points out. This is an indication to us that she had a greater clarity of prophecy than her husband. So Hashem was telling Abraham, although this seems Ra to you, listen to your wife, she knows what she's talking about. She has a deeper insight into this. Question though is, why was it Ra? If the Torah would have said it was difficult, it was heartbreaking for Abraham to do this, we would understand that description. Ra means it was bad. That's a judgment. It sounds like when Avram first hears that he needs to send away Yishmael, he disagreed with that. He felt Sarah was wrong. How in the world could he think that? Maybe he didn't see what Yishmael was doing, what he was up to. I'm sure Abraham was very busy being Makarev the world, but we also assume he had time for his family. And even if he didn't see firsthand, his wife is explaining to him, this is what Yishmael is up to. This is why I feel we need to send him away. So after hearing that from his wife, why in the world would it be ra be'enav? Why would he view it as an evil or wrong decision? Rashi has one explanation where he says it wasn't the decision to send him away that was ra in the eyes of Avraham, but rather it was learning about the fact that his son was actually so involved with these very unhealthy things. That was ra be'enav. However, the Medrash has a different interpretation. The Medrash says, we understand Avraham's response based on a pasuk in Yeshaya. Otzim einav meros bera. Yeshaya Hanavi is praising one who closes his eyes from seeing evil. I'm proactive in not seeing Ra. So the Yefei Toar, who's one of the great commentators on the Medrash Rabbah, one of the earliest we have, this goes back to the 1500s. He explains what the Medrash Rabbah is saying, and I think within the words of the Yefei Toar, we'll get a deeper insight into what actually was going through the mind of Avram Avinu and why it was Ra, why it was evil in his perception. Explains the Yefei Toar. Otzim einav meros bera. One is praised for closing his eyes, avoiding to see evil. Lo hayanose na libo in yane yishmol. Avraham, I want to translate the words literally. Avraham did not bring to his heart what was happening with Yishmael. Lachshod oso, to suspect him, livdok acharav, and to pursue and to investigate exactly what's going on. Why was he out to lunch? Was he not in tune? Was he too busy with more important things than to look at his son? Of course not. Rather, explains the Yefei Toar, hayamachzik oso kosher kamohu. He assumed his son Yishmael was kosher, was an upstanding person, kamohu, just like himself. Ulechein, and therefore, when his wife said we have to send him away, and she revealed to him the rishis, the evil of his behavior, lo hemin ba. He didn't believe what she was saying. V'chorelo, and he was upset. Eich poska hadin alav miyad. How can you just paskin immediately and tell me we have to send them away? It needs more yishuv hadas. There has to be conversation, deliberation. But how could you just say we have to send them away? Comes along Hashem, tells Avram, listen to your wife. She knows what she's talking about. There's one word in this Yefei Torah that jumps out of the page. And I think he's explaining on some level psychologically why Avram assumed Yishmael was kosher. The word is kamohu. Machzik oso kosher kamohu. He assumed he was kosher just like himself. Meaning to say, Abraham was not distracted. He was not too involved with more important things. He had a very rich and meaningful relationship with every member of his family. His assumption, though, his hargosha, his feeling towards Yishmael, is that you're a good kid. Because naturally, when I'm that kind of person, when I'm erlich, when I'm honest, when there's a special gentleness of the soul, I assume that other people are along the same wavelength. It doesn't mean that I'm naive, but ultimately, my judgment of any single person on this planet is my judgment. And the way I perceive any person is through my filter. If I'm an ish kosher, if I'm someone, I don't manipulate, I don't play games, I don't exploit. So then there's some level of understanding. My perception of you is you're similar. That's why it was so incredibly difficult for Avram to hear what Sarah was telling him. It was so difficult for him to believe that Yishmael wasn't the son he thought he was. Now, what does it mean he didn't investigate into Yishmael? Why didn't he look after him? It wasn't because he didn't care. It's because Otzim Einav, Meiros Bera. This is describing the quality of Avraham Avinu, that he saw the Tov. He saw the good in every human being. He wasn't looking for the Ra. In this particular case, he needed his wife, who was greater than him in her prophecy, to explain that unfortunately, we can't have him here in the house. But because of the natural personality of who he was and how he would see the world, he wasn't looking for negativity. He was almost attracted and obsessed with the positive within every human being. And likely, that's why he was so incredibly successful in inspiring and changing the entire world. The Rambam tells us that Avram was able to be makarev tens of thousands of human beings living in ancient barbaric times, and to bring them tachas kanfei shechina into the light and the truth of Hashem Echad, because he believed in every single human being. He saw their capacity, he saw their potential. Another component, which we have to assume was part of Avram's perception of Yishmael, was the natural love that he had as a father to a son. The pasuk in Shir Hashirim tells us, "Mayim rabim lo yuchlu lechabos esa ava." Vast floods cannot extinguish the love. Naros lo yishtafuha. Raging rivers cannot cover it. So the analogy here in Shir Hashirim is that the love is fire. That's an eish ha'ava, and it's so strong, it's so powerful. You could have all of the raging waters in the world. It's not going to extinguish my fire of love for you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is obviously in reference the love that we, B'nai Yisrael, have for Hashem. But it's also true between human beings. When there's such a powerful love, it almost makes it impossible to pick up on the negativity. I have to be looking for it. And if my personality is such, where I myself am an ish kosher, it makes it that much more difficult because I'm not looking for it. I'm looking and I'm attracted naturally to the good in everybody around me. When we look for the good in others, there's something magical that happens. I want to share that magic with you tonight. This is a fundamental piece from Rav Nachman Mibreslov. This is a piece that even those who are not intimately familiar with all of the teachings and the Torahs of Rav Nachman Mibreslov, this is one that stands out. It's in Reish Pei Beis, where he speaks about the idea of being dan l'chaf schos, of judging somebody favorably. And generally we assume that means if you see somebody doing something and you're not sure, was it inappropriate, was it okay, and generally he's a good guy, you have to assume that what he did was probably okay. And that's true, halacha, but there's something much deeper as well. Writes Rav Nachman Mibreslov, before we see the actual piece, there's a paragraph here that gives us a little background, telling us that Rabbeinu Zichronu Livracha, Rav Nachman Mibreslov himself, would caution his Talmidim, his Chasidim, Leilech im HaTorah hazos, to have this particular teaching with you. Put it in your pocket, hold on to it. Ki hu yesod godol l'chol mi sherotze li'yiskarev la'Hashem yisborach. If you're in the category of one of those people that want to come closer to God, this teaching will be crucial for you. And hopefully we're all in that category. Ki rov b'nei adam sherachokim me'Hashem yisborach, because the majority of people who feel that they are distant from Hashem, ikar richukam hu machmas mara shechora v'atzvus. That separation they feel comes from a sense of depression. comes from a feeling of hopelessness. Machma shenoflim bedaitam, because they've fallen. They've fallen, at least in their own perception. Veruban meyashmin atzan lagamre, and then many people who feel disconnected will reach a state of yiyush, of despair, and that's when we stop trying. And that's the most tragic thing that could ever happen to a human being, is when we stop fighting for our closeness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he writes, once we get to a point of some level of despair, we don't even continue doing those things we can and should be doing. I'll give you an example. It's often the case of someone struggling with any area of religion. That will impact their shalom bayis as well. And I've had numerous conversations with people throughout the years trying to categorize, where are the nisyonos, where are my challenges? And maybe it's true right now in this area, in this compartment of life and philosophy, I'm struggling. But that doesn't have to impact my relationship with my wife or my connection with my children. But naturally it does. Because when we're noflim badaitenu, when we're fallen in our own perception, then it just leads to a sense of despair. And even those things we could do and we believe in and we know this is true, I understand this is my role, this is my responsibility, why can't I just live up to it? Because I've given up on myself. So says Rav Nachman Breslov, this particular teaching is something you want to carry with you everywhere you go. And what he does here in this piece is he elaborates on the pasuk we say in Pesukei Zimra, Ahala Hashem b'chayai, I will praise Hashem with my life, Azamra l'Elokai ba'odi, and I will sing to my God ba'odi. Different ways of translating that. According to some, it means as long as I'm still here. Kol zman sh'nasham b'kirbi, as long as I'm alive and conscious, Azamra l'Elokai ba'odi. Others interpret odi meaning with all of my energy, right? Not in a passive way, but tapping into all of my kochos, Azamra l'Elokai ba'odi. Parenthetically, as we're thinking for a good pasuk to have in the parochas, this I think would be in the top 3. Just putting it out there for further discussion, right? It's not a common pasuk to have in a parochas, but it could be inspiring, something to think about. So explains with Nachmi Breslov, Da, ki tzorich loden es kol adam l'chavschos. We have to try to judge people favorably, but the way he interprets this is as follows. Afilu mishu rasha. Even someone, I have to see him every day, I have to interact with him, and I really believe he's just not a well person. He's not a good person. One thing the world has seen over these last 3 weeks is that yes, there's something called good and there's something called evil. There is good and evil in this world. And if you have to interact with someone who's categorized as a rasha, nonetheless, right, obviously we're not talking about extreme cases of people trying to kill you. Let's leave the extreme out and talk about, hopefully normal, everyday interactions. Says Rav Nachman Breslov, Tzarech lechapes v'limtso bo eze ma'atov. The requirement of being dan l'chavschos is not to pretend that really he or she is better than I think they are, but to actually search for a nakuda, to search for a kernel of good within that person. And then he says something incredible. This is the magic. Through you looking for that good in somebody else, that's not just between you and God, but you're actually having an impact on that person, moving them closer to schus, moving them closer to transformation. Your perception of another human being can actually assist them in doing tshuva and coming closer to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, tzarich ata lechapes levakesh limso bo ma'atov. The requirement of dan lechap schus is, I have to find something good. I have to find a nakuda, I have to find an angle where, you know what, I disagree with so much of what you stand for. And I'll let you know that we've had open arguments, and I've tried in the past, and there's so much here, there's so much conflict, there's so much tension, but with all of this, im kol zeh, I'm obligated to look for that nakuda, that element of tov. Then he goes on to say regarding ourselves, V'chein sarich adam limso gam ba'atzmo. The same thing is true when it comes to our perception of ourselves. Shetzarich adam lizahir ma'od lios besimcha tamid. Obviously a common theme within the writings of Rav Nachman Breslov. The goal is that we should be besimcha. And besimcha doesn't mean I have to walk around with a smile on my face, but I should be content, satisfied. Ulaharchika atzvus ma'od ma'od. And I should strive to relieve myself of some of those feelings of depression, of worry. However, explains Rav Nachman, the only way to have any level of simcha sachayim, to feel content, is by recognizing that there's such good within me. And just like I have to search for that good within you, I'm obligated to search for that good within me. And even if I have a hard time finding it, and I am down on myself, and even the good that I could point to, I see it's not pure, there are different reasons why I do it, my motivations are not necessarily fully genuine, nonetheless, im kol zeh, trust me, you're going to find some pure good. You have to keep on looking within. He concludes by saying, when we focus on the good and we appreciate the tov within us, we are actually infusing ourselves with life and vitality. Any connection to joy in life has to be related to a feeling of, I am worth something. I'm not a failure. And every element that I find within myself that I could point to and say, you know what? I'm proud of this. I feel good that I went out of my way for somebody else. I understand that there's a lot I could be doing better, I should be doing better, but I also see clearly what I'm doing, which is so incredibly beautiful. And rejoicing within every nakuda, every element of good that I find within me. And just like when I have that curiosity and that sense of exploring the good within you, that itself can bring you closer to tshuva. When I explore the good within me, that brings me closer to tshuva. And he says this is what the pasuk is referring to. Ahala Hashem b'chaye, I praise Hashem with my life. Azamra lelokai ba'odi, and I sing to Hashem ba'odi. What does that mean? Says Rav Nachman Breslov. Ba'odi is with the O that's still within me. No matter how I view myself, there's always ba'odi that's still there. And with that I'm able to rejuvenate, to bring a sense of chiyus, of vitality, to tap into a real simcha sachayim, and then I can sing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There was a fellow, Larry Levin, back in the 1970s. He had a small apartment in Brooklyn, and he went to yeshiva when he was in elementary school, and things didn't work out. Parents, rebbeim, and eventually he really left the Judaism behind, and he embraced somewhat of the hippie culture. And that was his dress, that was his connection to society was through that chevra. He had a long ponytail, he walked the walk, and he definitely he played the part well. For some reason, he was never super successful in business and never kept down a job. So he found himself looking in the classified section, seeing what might be out there. He sees, it reads, wanted janitor to clean yeshiva study hall and building, good pay. So good pay spoke to him. I don't mind being a janitor, I'll give it a shot. He calls up the number in the newspaper, and it turns out it's the yeshiva Shar Yoshuv. So he makes an appointment, and he finds himself standing in front of this massive, beautiful yeshiva. He walks into the office assuming that he's going to meet with some kind of executive director. It ends up that he actually meets with Rav Shlomo Freifeld himself, the Rosh Yeshiva, right, the founder and the creator of Shar Yoshuv. They begin schmoozing, and Rav Freifeld asked him the question, Larry, what's your background? Do you understand where we are right now? Yeah, no, I know this is a yeshiva. I went to a yeshiva when I was younger for a few years. And for some reason, Larry was compelled, just based on the compassion oozing out of Rabbi Freifeld, to share his story. And he went into all the gory details and where he was and what he's been through, trying to find himself. After the conversation, Larry's thinking to himself, what am I doing? I probably just lost whatever opportunity I had. Right? That's the problem with me. I'm too brutally honest sometimes. Rav Freifeld said, do you want a job? And he was surprised to hear her. He said, yeah, I would be excited and ready to go. So the job we have available is actually a Rebbe position. You'd be teaching Gemara, but I think you'd be perfect for the job. And he was speechless. He's looking at this Rosh Yeshiva, long white beard. He's like, I'm not sure you understand. I'm not religious. I haven't learned Gemara in 15, 20 years. I'm applying for the janitorial position. And Rav Freifeld said, it's very simple. Right now, this is the one job that we have open. If you'd like to take it, it's yours. We have to start Wednesday. Are you in or not? And thinking to himself that he really had no other option, he said, yeah. And he agreed. Rabbi Freifeld asked him, have you ever learned Bava Metzia? The first parak of Bava Metzia. And it sounded familiar. He remembered something about two guys holding on to a talis, but not much more than that. He said, here's the thing. We have 3 young men in the yeshiva who have longer hair than you do. And I think you would be a perfect Rebbe for them. You could relate to them, and you could inspire them. But I don't wear a yarmulke or tzitzis. How am I supposed to be a Rebbe in a yeshiva and teach them Torah if I don't even look the part? And Freifeld said back, so you should look the part. Right? You don't want to feel awkward. Go get yourself a yarmulke, get yourself some tzitzis, come in on Wednesday morning. So Larry agreed, and he did. And the way that he tells over the story is that first day was so strange, such a mixed array of emotion. Being nervous, feeling that he wasn't worthy for that position. Who am I to pretend that I could be a Rebbe and teach Gemara? I don't know the Gemara myself. But as he began teaching and he developed a relationship with these other young men, he started really enjoying it. And Baruch Hashem, he himself was more inspired. Fast forward 40-something years, no longer Larry, Levi. Rabbi Levi Levine is a very popular Rebbe in Eretz Yisrael, married to Chani with 9 children, and an impressive Marbitz Torah, someone who's spreading the Devar Hashem to hundreds of disciples. What changed Larry's life? The fact that you had someone who believed in you. Freifeld saw the Nekuda HaSatov. He saw there was good here. There's potential. You have to look deep sometimes, but that could change a person. That could change a person psychologically, and we know now from Menachem Beraslov, that could change a person on a mystical level. By you believing in me, even if I don't know how much you believe in me, even if I don't know what's going through your head, and for all I know, I might think you're looking at me and judging me, but really you're finding that Nekuda Satov. Your perception of me finding that good can bring me closer to tshuva. Finding the good within myself can bring me closer to tshuva. I want to end with an incredible letter. This is a letter that was written in 1908 by Rav Kook, Zecher Tzadik V'Kodesh Livracha. And he wrote this letter in response to a friend of his who was having a very difficult time with his son. He was getting very inspired by the Haskalah, by early Zionism that was not at all religious. And Rav Kook writes back as follows. This is the bottom of page 3. Semachti liros tevarav hayakarim li kechok ohavim ne'emanim. I was so glad to see your letter. As good friends, we share our lives with each other. Aval na'atzdi gam kein harbe mitzaro shel yedidi al devar banav. But I also was pained by the pain that you're going through with your son. I feel your tsar, and I want to give you some eitzah. I want to share with you a suggestion. Im yachshov karov hamon halomdim. If you were to assume, like many unfortunately do, writes Rav Kook, sheroi bizman hazeh lazov lehefker as osam habanim asher soru midarchei Torah ve'emunah, that if you have a child that has deviated from the derech of Torah and Emunah, based on zerem hazman hasower, on the storm of the time, what can you do? They're doing your thing, you're doing your thing. That's it. If you take that approach, hineni omer bepeh mole, I'm telling you unequivocally, shelo zu haderech asher Hashem chofetz ba. This is not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. Don't ever convince yourself that just because your child is presently not within the derech of Yadus, that therefore there should be some level of disconnect or despair or detachment. Chas v'sholom, says Rav Kook. Rather, you have to make sure to keep those bonds strong, to keep the relationship strong. He says, furthermore, we believe that most children, especially nowadays, he's talking about the early 1900s, they're a nuisance. This is not based on philosophical inquiry and coming up with a different idea or worldview. People are swept away by what's exciting, by what seems to be meaningful at the time. And he says, however, you should know, Yesh mikol eila achris v'tikva. There's hope. Just because your child now happens to be in a very different place than you are, emotionally and religiously, yesh tikva. Why is there hope? Because haneshama hapanimi shel kedushas Yisrael mistereres bekerev libam. Because that sanctity of neshama that we find within all of Klal Yisrael is within them. Bekama midos tovos hanimsos behem. And we could see that radiance of the neshama through many of the qualities they possess. Because you have to believe me that the Kedusha is always there, therefore you could also have a sense of confidence. Kasher zerem hazman yishapech. When this particular trend, when the storm of the time will subside, v'yakir restos hagadol hanimtzeis be'ikar rayon, it could very well be people will see the mistake that they once believed in. What's the difference between someone who's ultra-liberal and someone who's somewhat more conservative? About 20 years. Just give yourself some time to live life a little bit, and that's how you slowly make your way back to more of a central view. I never discuss politics, but it's a good line. So says Rav Kook, he says, trust me, the Kedusha is there, and you have to give it time, you have to give them space, but the hope is there as well. And you should know, when you speak to your child, Bris krusa hi ledevarim hayotzim min alev. We have a covenant. We have a promise from HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Chazal that when you speak words that come from the heart, nichnasim al alev, they enter the heart. They're receptive because the Kedusha of the Yiddish neshama is there and it's alive and it's vibrant. Ha'ikr, then he writes something so prophetic. He was obviously speaking to his time and what was happening in the world. but we see it right here and right now. He says, right now, if you could inspire the younger generation, even those who are not connected with Yiddishkeit, with Torah, with Emunah, but you could instill with them an avas ha'am, a love and a pride of the nation, a nation asher mimenu chotzevo, that they themselves come from. V'lo yishku b'dimyonos, and they should not be led astray to mistakenly think ki yeh lehem maimin hogur mechuber b'chaim al yedei kirvas b'nei necher. Don't allow them to feel that, you know what, I could have a very purposeful and meaningful existence within the non-Jewish world, and they'll embrace me fully. Because, says Rav Kook, that might be true for the moment. However, as we've seen throughout history, and as we see with our own eyes today, Acher kach, b'chol leis kilshon, heinam smeichim b'mapalosa. In a time of difficulty, in a time of distress, the people who you thought were your friends will rejoice in your downfall. They should never believe they're going to find their purpose in the outside world. Rather, continue to inspire them that they're part of Am Yisrael. V'al yedei hisorah shel avas ha'uma. And through that awakening that they will feel, through the love of the nation and the pride they have of being Jewish, Yuvar hazik shel regesh amuna v'netiyas kedusha, that will ignite that connection to kedusha and to the Torah that right now is somewhat buried within that neshama. It's an amazing revelation to see, as we've spoken about, for the past many weeks, the incredible achdus and the ruach hatshuva, speaking to people on the front lines of Kiruv, who are standing in awe of young men coming in to put on tefillin. They've never put on tefillin in their lives. They've never come to a class before because I don't have that much of an interest. I've never kept an entire Shabbos because why would I try? It's just so off my radar. What is it that's awakening people that don't have much of a connection to the religious aspect of Yahadus? There's a sense of pride, there's a sense of connection that's starting from a very basic fundamental point. We're all part of Klal Yisrael. Amcha kulonu. And from that, it ignites the Kedusha within them, and that brings them to real purpose, to real meaning. To stop just by waving a flag and feeling proud to be part of Am Yisrael without taking a step closer to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, all that inspiration would not be achieving its purpose. But what we're seeing with our own eyes is a Ruach HaTshuva. We're seeing the spirit of return that's coming from a sense of, yes, we are all one, we're all part of Klal Yisrael. And so much of the unity that we're experiencing is based on, given our present situation, it is so much easier just to see the good in others. Not to look at any of the superficialities that create those strange boundaries between us. Where we're feeling that right now. That was the midah of Avram Avinu. That's why he had a difficult time seeing the Ra within Yishmael. And although in that particular case, Sari Menu was correct, but the quality, the midah of Avram was definitely correct as well. Something we strive for. Look for the good in others around us. Look for the good within ourselves. And by doing so, we will bring others to tshuva and we bring ourselves closer to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Shkoyach.